Okay, so what is locking, I guess? That's the first thing that a lot of people are going to be asking about if they've never had any experience with locking. There are a number of questions that I'm going to go through, and you're going to see what locking is, and we'll hit those right now. So bear with me. There is a lot to cover, and I'm sure if you've got any questions, please write them down at the end. I will ask the questions. Ask for questions, because if I do it during the webinar, we'll never get through it all. And if we don't get your answers at the end of the webinar, please by all means send a question to support at the Steel Detailer. Now, locking has been something of a major topic within TSD. Some customers have had some fun with it. I know Nico has over the years, and now he's pretty much got it sorted and knows exactly how it works. When I say a couple of years, it's because we did have some processes there that prevented you from making changes to locked members, and now we've added it in, and it's making it a little bit more flexible. And that's why I think Nico's online, because he wants to see what you can do now. All right, so let's get started. I'll just minimize this and hit that. Okay. So some common questions that get asked by our customers is, and I'll just go through them, and then what I'll do is I'll go to a live model, and we'll see what actually happens when we lock. Okay. So member locking, we want to know what it is. We want to know what it does. We want to know if it's required. Can you unlock a member? Absolutely. What is SQL Sync? Some of you have probably seen that pop up on the screen. What items can be locked and unlocked? What actually happens in the database? What are the rules of locking and what are the rules of unlocking? And what can you do to members that are locked? And parts, of course. And then we're going to go into some troubleshooting. You know, what happens if you get a crash that's halfway through a lock? What happens if locking stops and you don't know if it's finished or not? And what should I do if unlocking starts swapping out the wrong parts, which is a fundamental thing that I think new customers see, and it's just due to certain processes that haven't been adhered to at the beginning. Now, SolidWorks is completely flexible, and we can model and we can do anything we like in there. TSD has some strict rules, and it's filtered to a certain process that if you follow those rules, everything works perfectly, and it really does. I can really state that because I'm at that stage now when I model things at the beginning and in the template phase. I'll get into the template phase and then the locking phase, and I'll show you what they are. But at the template phase, if you don't get it right, in the locking phase you're going to get some funny things happening. So we'll just go through all that and how we can troubleshoot that at one stage. So let's just go through these questions, and I'll get to a certain point and then I'll go live and I'll show you exactly what happens. I'm not one of those guys that puts you through a PowerPoint slideshow of death, which a lot of you have probably experienced. However, I do like to talk, and if you like to listen, I can teach you. So let's get on to the next part of it. So what is member locking? So member locking is a phase of your project that happens when you're ready to finalize a member, and it should only be really done at the end, and if you're really convinced that you don't need to make any changes. That used to be the principle and the philosophy behind it, but we've added a lot more functionality in being able to change things at the end. Okay, and we'll go into that as well. So member locking is a combined list of processes designed to speed up the final result of your models and drawings. Okay. So what does it do? So member locking is, and I'm just getting a little bit of feedback here. I'll just fix this up. Okay, mute all. Okay, there we go. So I got everyone muted. Okay, so member locking completes a long list of functions, okay, and what it does is instead of you going click this button, click this button, click this button, click this button, it actually does the whole lot for you in one go, which is really nifty. It just speeds things right up. So let's just go through the processes. So it copies the template files over the locking folders and renames them. So template files are files when you insert your member into a project, it creates a member folder and then the actual member folder name, and then inside that folder are called template files. Now TSD template files, that's what it should be called, so we don't want to confuse anybody. Now before you lock, we call this the template phase. So they're template files and they're not locked, which means that your drawings don't have certain things in them. Okay, so it copies these files over into locking folders, and we'll cover that so that you can see how that works. It consolidates plates and vendor items. So if there are similar plates in your project and similar vendor items in your project, it will consolidate them and total them. So you probably don't see sections there. We don't do sections, and there is a reason for that. Sections themselves carry data that can go into general arrangement drawings. So we can't consolidate them. What I mean by that is if you've got two columns, we use the column member to store the data in to call up the mark number of the actual item on the general arrangement drawing. So if you consolidate the two column parts, you will end up with the same part in both, and then we can't use that data in a GA. Okay, now one of my guys in my office at Quadro said to me that we can now use balloons. So we're going to look into that, and then maybe consolidation might be an option for sections. However, at the moment you can't. Okay, so what it also does is it populates the custom properties of sections and plates with the description, length and weight fields. They are fields that get added very similar to the way the BOM compiler works, which we covered last week. Also with the actual what we do with plates and vendor items and the naming. If you haven't seen that, just let me know. I can send you a link to the video. It's up on YouTube, and you can go through that at your own pace. If you're a customer, it's in the portal for resellers and customers. Okay, the link's in there for it. Okay, what it also does is it hides excluded components from the BOM. Okay, now we use dummy components for packing out plates and things like that. It hides those. Okay, now fasteners can also be selected or assigned to a member when you lock it, which means that if I have bolts that are on a beam and the beam bolts to a column, I go to lock the member of the beam, it will, if I select the connection for those bolts, add the bolts to that member for reporting, and it will also show the bolts for that member as well. Now what it also does is for drawings, and there's one thing I did forget to put on there, is it swaps out your project templates and copies them and replaces them. Sorry, it doesn't copy them, it replaces them in your project drawing. So when you insert something from the library, whatever that drawing is that's in the library, that drawing sheet template that's there from your library, it could come from a TSD library component, that will get swapped out for you automatically at locking stage, and it will replace it with the project template. And it actually occurs, hang on, I'll just turn this off, and it actually occurs when you're locking. It will replace the welded member, the plate, the section, and the vendor item drawing sheet templates for you in one go, which is really, really handy. What it'll also do is it'll update and add a BOM to each of those drawings. Okay, so if you when you go through the consolidation process and you have two plates in two different sub-assemblies, what TSD does is it'll consolidate those two. It'll say, okay, there's one, so let's just go with a base plate in the bottom of a column. It'll say that there's one base plate in that column and there's another base plate in the other column. And if they're identical, it will swap them out and make them the same. It will also update the drawing and give you a total for the BOM. Okay, you can't get this with SolidWorks functionality. With SolidWorks functionality, for me to get the total of two columns in a BOM, I've actually got to drop the entire assembly for the area which contains those items into the drawing and then do some funny stuff jiggling around trying to get the BOM to work the way that I want it to give me my total, which is a bit slow and tedious. However, TSD stores this information in the database. So when you lock something, it totals it and stores it in the database for us, which is really handy. Okay, so what it also does is it updates the mark and quantity note, which you'll get on your drawings. If you go to insert a member from TSD, you'll see that there's a note that sits in the members drawing. It's just a member drawing. It's not a section drawing note, which I've seen people do. They put it on the section drawing. You don't put that note on a section drawing. You put it on a member drawing. Now, what I mean by a member, it's a welded member assembly. Okay, a section is a part. What it also does is it populates the project data in the title block. So when you set up your project at the beginning, the information that you've put in to set up the project information at the beginning of your project, that automatically gets put into your title block at the same time, saving you a little bit of money and time, again, with another nice feature that TSD's got inside of it. So you can see there's a long list of things that actually occur through a locking process. Okay, I'm going to show you all that. I'm going to cover that, and we'll see what happens in the database as well. Okay, so you can see how that occurs in the database and how we can actually troubleshoot any things that go wrong with it, because there are a lot of things that happen, and we've got to make sure that we get our model right, and when we go to the locking phase from the template phase, everything works well. So another thing that pops up is locking really required? Well, you've got to ask yourself this question: do you need to consolidate your parts for your project deliverables? Consolidation means I want all my parts that are the same to be consolidated, even though they're right through the whole project. That's usually the question that I ask. And the other thing too is your BOM. Do you want totals in your BOMs on your drawings? If you don't need totals for your fabrication, say what I mean by totals is that there might be 2 column C1s, and your BOM actually has to show that there are a quantity of 2 for everything, because you might have 2 of the same plates in there, and if there's 2 columns, means there's 4 components. You might want to show that in your drawing. It's up to you if you don't. However, across the board, I'm finding that that's what customers require, so TSD does that for you. Now, you have to do a lock to be able to achieve that. If you don't need to lock, right, and you think you don't need to lock, just talk to me, and we'll have a talk about how there might be processes where you can avoid it if you don't want to do that. Locking is great. It does a lot of things and saves you a lot of time and money in going through multiples and multiples of drawings, which is what we do in structural detailing. All right, so the next question is, can you unlock a member? Well, of course. If you put it into a lock stage and you unlock it, you can go back to the template stage, exactly what that is. Now, if you've got 2 columns, column 1, column 2, and they both have the same base plate in them, if you actually unlock column 1, the base plate that's in column 2 is still locked. But the plate that was in column 1, because you've unlocked it, has gone back to the template. What it will do is it will open up the drawing in column 2 for the plate and adjust the quantities in the unlock process. Right? So you'll get this process where your drawings are going to get superseded, which is 2 S's inside of it, and it tells you that that drawing has now changed. The beautiful thing about it is also is that the document manager that we've got in there, which we'll cover next week because we're going to get into deliverables, basically you'll see in there that the drawing's changed. So that's a nice little nifty feature when we go through the unlocking process. Unlocking just puts everything back to where it was before you locked it. That's the trick to the whole game. The only time that you would ever do something like that, if you're going to unlock it, and we'll get into these rules so that you can see how they are, they're coming up, basically is to make some major changes to your project because someone's neglected to give you a bit of information in the detailing phase, or maybe you've given it to an engineer and they've done a check on it and they want to change things, and then you've got to go back and change them. And we're going to get into the flexibility of what you can do with locking as well, because we've had some nice changes over the last 3 months on what we can do with locking, what we couldn't do with locking before, because we've added some features into SQL Sync. So what is SQL Sync? So when your mouse on your desktop sits idle for 10 minutes, it automatically runs, okay? And what it does is it's about grabbing your model items and it's syncing it with the database so that they are in sync. That's basically what it is. Now, it only works with locked items, okay? Locked items. So when you're dealing with locked files, and you may have changed something in them, and you can do that now, the SQL Sync will automatically pick up that information, and it will tell you that some information's changed, and you will okay it, and it will update the database for you. Okay, now I'll get into what that data is so that you can understand what that is very shortly. Now, let's just say with SQL Sync, we've actually got this working quite nicely now, so that if a customer zipped up their model for us and sent it to us, all we had to do was just set up the project, right? We don't need your data, okay? And if the project is locked or partially unlocked, either way it doesn't matter, we just run SQL Sync over the top of it, and it adds all the data into the database for us, including checking to see what the unlocked member is as well, and puts that data in there so that we can unlock and lock your project. That's a nifty little tool, because now if we can do that, that means we can make changes. And we can blow away data that's in the database for your project and re-establish the database if something terribly goes wrong. And sometimes, you know, things that are uncontrollable outside of TSD does go wrong, because we're dealing with SQL, we're dealing with Microsoft, Windows, and we're dealing with SolidWorks. and we're dealing with services that are running in the background, and anything could possibly go wrong. So you need to know that that's there as a fallback feature, and I will cover that as we get into this further down the track. Now, if we look at what actually can happen, let's just say if a template from the templates location gets deleted, so that means that someone's gone in there and removed a file from where it was after a lock, which is what I've had in the past with customers, and they go, oh, I shouldn't have deleted that, but I've deleted it. What SQL Sync will do now is it will go through the list of all the files in the folder, and if it can't match the locked file with the file in the unlocked area, in the templates area, it will create a new one, and it will create it from the locked file and its drawing and put it in there, and it will sequentially number it automatically for you, so you don't need to worry about that anymore. What that means is that by putting that over there, it's able to update the database and put in the database where the location of where the unlock file is, so that when you come to the unlock process, to the template stage, you can simply just unlock. That saves a lot of time and a hassle. Just thought I'd point that out, that we've added that into SQL Sync as well. Now, what items can be locked and unlocked? Okay, now we can lock a member. Say a member is a welded member assembly, okay, and it contains connections, sections, plates, and vendor items. Okay, now the components that are inside a locked member go through a consolidation process, and this consolidation process is where the parts that were templates sections are becoming locked sections, and you can see the name change. Okay, so we've gone from quite a large file name for a connection member, or sorry, connection section, and it just names it in a sequential order with the code SE for section, and there's up to 9,999 components that can be sections in your project. Now, we haven't hit that threshold just yet, so I'd like to see it challenged. If it does hit that threshold, then you can start looking at splitting your project out into different projects, which is not a big deal. Okay, now with parts that are plates, the same thing happens. Your plate gets locked into a PL file, and it's sequentially numbered as well. Basically, what we're doing is we're trying to keep the final product code down below 12 digits, because some CNC machines that are out there, and we're currently working on DSTV CNC, it means that when certain items get labelled because they get inscribed on the actual section or on the plate, that length has to be a certain length. So there are some CNC machines out there, and we have to abide by that. Okay, so that's what causes the length to be what it is, and the actual code, PL, means that that's a locked plate. SE is a locked section. So when we do a filter using the SolidWorks filter, if I wanted to find out if I had locked components in there, I just type in -SE and then 00, and that establishes the fact that that is a locked section. And I can filter through and find out where all my locked sections are, which is really handy. Vendor items are exactly the same. So vendor gets the same thing, and it's got a VN code for vendor item. So it goes from a V to a VN, which is really handy. You can find out what a vendor item is. So that's what happens to the files. I'll show you how this works in a sec live. So what actually happens in the database, I'll show you that as well. So there are 4 tables in the database that keep a link to the models and the drawings that are affected during a lock. Because the actual database keeps the actual instance of the part that gets changed from an unlock to a lock, and from a lock back to an unlock, that information needs to be captured so that you can do that quite easily, and it does it very easily. So whenever a section or a plate or vendor items go through locking, the database does keep that link there, right? And it happens with drawings as well, so that we can swap drawings in and out, and we can actually keep tabs on what's happening with the drawings. Now, the rules of locking, okay, the most crucial stage for locking, and you have to get it right, otherwise you may end up with some problems down the track, is the stage 1. So getting from point A to point B, if you can see it down there. Point B is the middle of your project, point A is the beginning, and this is the template phase. Right? When you go through your locking, you're going into stage 2, which is lock phase. Point C means that you're going to completion, which means you're going to get into your deliverables and your documentation. I've sort of broken it up this way just to show you that there are 2 main stages in creating a project using TSD. Okay. Now there are tips and tricks that you must follow that are in the tutorials You click on that, download it. It's a PDF. I'll show you where that is in a sec as well. That PDF shows you what you can and can't do. Right? One instance, I'll just give you an example. Let's just say I've got a pattern in a column, right, of cleats that go up the column. If I suppress the pattern seed component, I'm going to get problems. The reason I'm going to get problems is because when I go to lock it, it's suppressed. I can't swap it out, but it'll swap out the pattern components. And when I go to unlock, it's going, oh, I can't change that because they're pattern components and the seed component doesn't work. So that's one of our rules. You just cannot do that. So you just got to follow the rules in stage one, getting from point A to point B. Now, at the end of all this, I've got a real beaut way of you learning faster so that you don't interfere with your project at locking and unlocking and getting into that intense process, because it can get intense. Things don't work the way you want it to. You want to make sure it does. Okay? You don't want to go in there, and this is why we don't expect our customers to go live on a live project straight away, because you've got to understand what this process is doing. You've got to understand what it can and can't do. Okay? And point A to point B, we stress on the rules, the tips, rules, and what this does is this just streamlines everything and says, this is what you have to do. If you step out of that, you're going to get problems. Don't step out of that. SolidWorks is flexible, and it will allow you to step out of that. If everyone follows the rules, there's no problems, and we wouldn't need support. But we do supply support, so we do get problems. And from time to time, you know, we have to educate people so that they understand this process. Even Quadro Design have had a lot of fun with locking and unlocking because people struggle to follow the rules. All right. So the rules of unlocking are similar to locking for point A to point B, okay? And there are certain things you cannot do. So if you change the lock section size or change a plate shape or thickness in a locked environment, SQL Sync must occur, right? And what SQL Sync will do is it will update the data in the database so that when you go to do an unlock, the data will not be affecting anything. Right? Because the data's mismatched, and you want to make sure it's not mismatched, so you run SQL Sync. Unlock does not update BOM data apart from the quantities. Okay, so as I said before, 2 columns, 2 base plates, 2 different columns, two different base plates, and if I unlocked one column and the other column still resides and the 2 base plates are in the quantities, the base plate that's still locked will get its drawing updated on the quantities only. It doesn't update any sections or anything, or any description information whatsoever, or any length information whatsoever. Just thought I'd point that out. Now, if unlocking a member that contains consolidated parts from another member, okay, that's where it will update the drawings on the locked components. And it will also put SS in the revision so that it will tell you that that drawing is now changed, and it will also do it to the document manager. I'll show you this whole process. So what can you do when members are locked? Okay, this is new functionality we've added in over the last 3 months. And it will get easier and easier as we figure out how we can get the database to work a lot easier without affecting people in the processes. So a user cannot delete parts or members that are locked. So if you've got a member that's locked and it contains parts, you cannot delete it. If you delete that, the database will be out of sync and your quantities will be out of whack. We haven't written the code to find items that are missing. Okay, we've written code to find items that have changed. So we just have to get to that stage. We haven't got there yet. So we just say, no, you can't delete it. Now, if you want to delete it, you have to unlock it, then delete it. No big deal. Okay, unlocking, then deleting it. You can still do it. It's fine. You can add new template parts and run a relock. What I mean by that is, let's just say you forgot to put a connection on a locked member and you need to put a new connection in. You can do that. And then you just relock it again. You can add lock components in the same assembly by dragging and dropping. So if you select a feature in an assembly and drag and drop, a feature part or a component in an assembly, and you drag and drop that, that creates a new instance of that lock component. Just simply run SQL Sync over the top of it, and it will look for it in the database, and if it can't find it, it'll add it. That's what SQL Sync will do for you. Now you can also change section sizes. So if you want to change it from a section type to a different section type, you can do that. There's no problems. If you want to change a plate and its dimensions, you can do that as well. Let's just say, for instance, worst case scenario, you've got a floor and you need to change its height, and it updates the bracing lengths and everything, updates the cleats and everything automatically updates because it's all parametrically linked. You run SQL Sync over the top of it. It'll tell you all the components that are changed, and it will update the database and sync the database with it. You cannot copy a locked member assembly or a locked part. Okay, it'll tell you cannot do that. When you do the audit for a locked member assembly and you go to copy it, will tell you in the audit that you've got files looking externally. Okay, that's telling you that you cannot copy it, and we've got a flat out message that pops up for copying locked parts that says you cannot copy it. Now, copy means you're creating a whole new instance of that. You can duplicate locked parts but not members. So parts inside your welded member assembly or connection can be duplicated. You just have to run SQL Sync over the top of it to sync the database. Okay, so if you need to make changes to a project and you're looking at it and you're going, this is going to be a huge change, the best thing for you to do is just to completely unlock everything, make the change, and then relock everything. And it doesn't take long to lock. It's fairly quick. As long as you've got a solid state drive, it's fairly quick because it'll read it off the solid state drive. No problem. Now, I haven't covered project lock and project unlock, which is in TSD projects. It's exactly the same process, okay, except that you don't get to select, when you go to lock with project locked, you don't get to select which bolts belong with which member, and your bolts don't show up. Some customers prefer just to lock the whole project in one go and then come through and then show and hide the bolts and the fasteners that they need, which is fine. You can do that as well. A project unlock will just go through all your members and unlock them. Now, when you're locking, I haven't covered this, but when you're locking, just make sure that if you've got two of the same member in your assembly, make sure that they're both unsuppressed. You can have columns through your project or beams through your project, and if they are different members and different with a different mark or a different file name or sequential number, you can suppress and unsuppress as you work. That way it's quicker to lock and unlock. There's no problems with that, but just make sure that when you do your unsuppress and suppress processes of being able to speed things up, that, you know, if you've got 5 column C1s in there, make sure that all 5 are unsuppressed because you want to capture the quantities. Okay, so you can suppress and unsuppress just to speed things up as you're done, and once you've locked a member, you can suppress it and then go to the next member and start going through its locking processes. So there are some processes there that will speed things up as you go. Okay, so troubleshooting I'll get into, which is the next one, but let's just have a look and see how all this works, okay? Because you've got to see how it all works. Now, what I can't do is I can't duplicate a crash in the middle of a process. I can't duplicate that. I can't go through that process until it's happened to you. You'll go, oh, okay, we're going to have to figure out how we can fix this, because it's not common for TSD or SolidWorks to crash in the middle of a lock. It doesn't happen. What I am saying is it's happened a couple of times, but it's not common. If you have it happen, please contact us and we'll certainly have a look at your system to make sure that everything's working okay with it. I've had a customer where every time they went to lock, it just crashed. So what we said was uninstall SolidWorks, uninstall TSD, uninstall Windows, reinstall everything, and from that point on, no problems. So somewhere in the mix of all the different software packages with SQL, Microsoft, SolidWorks, and TSD in there, it just didn't like it. So, and they were also having other problems with other things as well, which sort of gave it away that there was a bit of instability in all the different software packages. So first up, I just want to let you know that it's not common for TSD to crash in the middle of a locking process. What is common is sometimes you might get scenarios where you've got a server with a database and you might have multiple PCs hanging off it and they're all accessing the database at the same time. There may be situations where data does not carry across, and that's because of network connectivity issues. And we get that from time to time with certain customers because their network isn't set up properly. So we have to go through a troubleshooting process with networks. Okay, so troubleshooting isn't just TSD, it's also all the other things that are going on around it. So let's have a look at a live process of locking and unlocking. So basically I've logged into a project here, and I've got my frame here that I've just inserted, and one thing I should always do when you insert a frame is to exclude it from BOM. You don't want it coming up in your BOM, it's a driving sketch. I'm just going to put a column in, so if I go up into my TSD members and go to columns, and I've got different columns in here, I'm going to pick a column that's suitable for this scenario. I'll put it on that line. All right. Now what I'll do is I'll put another column over here, and I'll show you that column. Okay, so now I've got two columns that are different. However, they have the same plates in them physically. That means that the base plate and the cleats that are in that column, that for the bracing, if I zoom in on it, in both columns, the cleats are physically the same. That means the volume, the centroid, its mass, and its surface area are identical. So this base plate and the base plate in the other column are physically the same. However, they are different parts. Okay? They are different parts. Because when you insert from the library, TSD puts them in their own file naming processes, which we covered a couple of weeks ago, and those file names are isolated from one another, so that these are different instances of an assembly. So if I pull my feature tree down, I've got column 1, column 2. So they're two different columns, and every part that's in there has the same naming convention right through. Okay, now I'm going to do a duplicate process here as well. I'm just going to save, rebuild, so that it updates the model as well. Now at the moment the database has got very little information in it, because we're not in a lock phase at the moment. What we do have is some drawings in the document manager, and if I go to the document manager, you can see that the drawings associated to everything that came in is now in the document manager. Okay, by no means are these ready for any sort of deliverable stage. This is a template stage, and I am working with templates. It means I'm going to be modifying models, I'm going to be putting connections in, and I'm going to be copying things all over the place. I'm laying out. In Australia we call it a layout. So right now I'm just going to duplicate a member. That means I'm going to create a second instance of the same item. I'm going to put it over there. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So now I've got two of the same columns in my project. So I've got column 1, column 1, column 2, column 2, and you'll see that there's a second instance on both columns 1 and 2 that I just added. The beautiful thing about that is, if I change the base plate on column 1 over here on this instance, obviously this is the same assembly over here, and that's got the same part in it, that will automatically update as well. That's why I like using instances of the same items. When I look at a project and I'm going to still detail it, I look to see where the items are the same, because if I change something over here, I want it to change over there as well. I'm pretty lazy like that. I want to try and speed things up as much as possible. All right. So I do that first up with my projects. So let's get into this locking stage, and I'll show you what's happened with the filing. Right. If I go in and have a look at this member, okay, there's my column. Okay, this is in the members folder. So I've got AA, and I'll just make sure. Yep. So I got AA, I got members, and in there I've got my column. These are some old pieces of crap that should have been removed, so I'll just remove them while I'm at it. So in here I've got my column 1, my drawings that are associated to it, and my connections. These are called template files, TSD template files, because they haven't been locked yet. They haven't gone through the lock phase. Okay, the same can be said for the other column. So you can see it's got its own file names all the way through, and it's got its own connections inside of that. So you can see now I've got two columns in here. I'm just going to close that one off. Now let's go through this locking phase. So if we go TSD members and we go lock member, I'm going to lock the first column, okay? And I just select the section, and it pulls up the section, and in there I've got the name of the actual section, the member, the welded member as it comes up. And in here I've got a list of the connections. Now with the list of connections, I can select which connection I want the bolts to come with. So if it's a beam, I can select the end plate connections, or if it's a column, I can select the base plate connections, which is what I've done. And you can see as I've selected it, it's highlighted the connection. If I go to the cap plate, you can see that that's highlighted the cap plate at the top. Okay, you want to make sure which one you get. And obviously through the process of creating plates, when you set up your project initially, you get the option to choose whether you want flat bars used in your project or not. Depending on what country you come from, flat bars may not be used, and you just use laser plasma cutting. So if I pull out here, you can see the whole process happening. Okay, it might be a little quick for you to see at your end because there's a lot of things happening at once, but I'll go through them so that you can see it. So this is the audit. It's looking to see that I've got points A to B working right before it locks it. Okay, we're continually adding new items to the audit so that we make sure that we're getting that streamlined process to stop the locking process from giving us grief. So you can see now it's adding in the BOM to the drawings, and it's putting in the title block information, and it's swapped out the sheet format. All this is happening at once. This is what the audit's doing. Now what it's doing is it's putting the drawings into a final state. You'll notice that both columns have changed colours. Okay. If I go and open up column 1 and have a look at the filing system, everything that's associated to the templates still remains in here. So it doesn't delete the files that are in there, it keeps them there. You do not want to delete these files, however SQL Sync will replace them, but do not delete them, keep them there. Hard drive space these days are cheap, really cheap, so don't worry about having those files there. They're also there so that if we unlock, we can go back to them. So let's have a look at what's happened here. Here's the section. You can see the SE that we went through in one of the PDF slides that we had. So it's locked that. Let's go into the connection. So in the cat plate, right, we've got a PL there. So it's converted the plate. And now if we go into the base plate, you can see it's sequentially ordered all of these plates. Right, so all those plates now have got a PL in front of them. It's copied the plates from the template area. So let's open up the location as to where this is kept. I think I might have put it in here. Yep. Okay, so this is location. You'll see 3 folders now that have been created in the top level of your project. Plates, sections, and vendors. Now if I go into my plates folder, all my plates and their corresponding drawings are all in here now. Okay, this gives you a long list of all the plates associated to your project. So all the plates and their drawings are in here. Oh, before you lock to, just make sure you update your drawings as well, because you don't want to have to go through and update a lot of drawings. Just make sure they're right. We put them in the library, but anyway, when we go through a lock, you can go through the drawings in here and just do a little bit of a check on them to make sure they're all right. So there. I don't have any vendor items in there, so with the vendor items, we can safely say that there are no files in the vendor items. Okay, because there's no files, there's nothing to worry about. All the sections. So there's one column, and there is one section that we've locked. Let's have a look at what's happened to the drawing for this member. Okay, so what's happened? You'll notice that the mark number, which is the file name in here, all the plates have been labelled and the sections been labelled. You'll see that the materials have been added, the lengths have been updated, the masses have been updated, and you'll also notice that because we have 2 of the same item, it's totaled them all, which is really good. You'll notice that all the mark numbers have updated to match the marking system for us, and you'll also notice that there is a note associated to this. Now this is naughty, this note. That should have a column in front of that. This is an old model, and I'm hoping that that's not through the whole library, and if it is, let me know. I need to fix that. It's also told me that there are 2 in the project, and it's given me a total quantity of the 2 and 1 for the single unit. Now, if you've got 10 in the project, it will automatically update that for you. However, I have not dropped in the entire project to get my quantities to work. I've only got a link to the assembly, which is the welded member assembly, to get that information. It's also populated the data that I set up at the beginning of the project. Okay, if you wanted to find out what that data was, you simply go to TSD Projects, Project Manager, and in here, select the project, which is 002. Okay, and you can see project location 1, 2, 3 has come into the drawing automatically for us. So it populates a bit of data for us. If you don't set that up right, we'll cover it next week, and we'll show you that if you don't set that up right, you can actually override it in the document manager, and it will tidy that up for you. The library drawing that this was attached to has now been changed to the project template that we selected when we set up the project. So that sheet template has now changed. So these are all the things that have occurred through a lock. Now let's have a look at the section. If I go and open up the sections drawing, you can see that it's telling me that there are 2 in the total for that section. And the length's been updated, the mass has been updated, and there's my section drawing. And also with the section drawing, the template's changed and the information for the project's changed. Now, can you start seeing the power of how a lock can really improve performance? Because all that information there just got put in and done for you automatically. Let's have a look at the base plate. Okay, so it's totaled them. There's 2. It's filled in the base plate information, put the BOM in for us, okay, and it's also populated the data associated to the project. Swapped out the sheet template as well. Okay, so we've locked one column. Whoop-de-doo. Let's lock another column that has the same physical components in it that are different. Because right now, if I look at that, you can see that that part there is that part, and it's quite large in its name. If I look at this part here, it's plate 2. So let's lock this one. So I just do a Control Q and a save. I always do that before I do a lock, just to make sure that any changes that I have made get updated. So I'm now selecting the base plate, the bolts in that one. I'm going through a lock. There it goes, hiding the dummy components. And now it's going through the process of checking to see if vendor items already match, plates match, and sections. It's doing the BOM. And that's just the graphics card with GoToMeeting and recording and everything happening at once there, getting that white screen. So that's been locked. Now let's have a look at this plate. All 4 columns are now locked. Let's have a look at the plate. So if we open the drawing up for the plate, we now have a quantity of 4, which is a total for the project. But we've got 2 different columns. And all I've got in here is a reference to one plate, not the entire assembly. TSD really saves you a lot of money and time there. Now this plate, which is a cleat plate that's detailed, it's telling us there are 4 there too. So you can see how it's totaled them. Really handy. Now if I was to change that plate there, all 4 of them would automatically update. So you've got to be careful because there's consolidation that's occurred through the process of locking. So if you do change a plate after it's been locked, just be wary that that plate can be used elsewhere in the project. And if you want to find a plate that's missing, just type in -P-L-O-O-O-4, okay, and you can see that there are plates being used in those locations. And that should really give me a list of the locations of where they are being used across all of them. And it's just giving me one instance, which is a bit strange. First instance only, and it's not giving me the second instance, and it should. If you really want to find all of them, I think it's just PL, dash through PL, and I'm using the filter, by the way. So dash PLO. Yeah, interesting how it only gives me one instance. Anyway, there are 2 instances, and just be wary. I'm just letting you know that if you do make a change, that you want to make it so that, you know, if it does change, you're aware of it, because it can be dangerous. You go change a plate and you don't realise that it's somewhere else, and it changes and it clashes. Just be wary of it. Okay, so now it's locked it all. You'll notice that when I go over into the locking place, there are now 2 sections. As I said, it does not consolidate sections. So the data that we put into these things can be used in general arrangement drawings, and it comes from the section. I cannot consolidate column 1 with column 2 sections without losing that data. And as I said earlier, one of the guys in my office realized that you can now do this with balloons. I've not proven it yet, but you can do it with balloons. So we may add the option in so that you can do this in the near future. Still no vendor items, and all the plates are here in one area now. Now let's go through an unlock so you can see what happens with an unlock. Oh, by the way, if we go into the document manager, you'll see that they have the locked status next to the items down here on the right hand side that tells you those items are now locked. And you'll notice that there were a lot more drawings in there before, but because they're locked and they're consolidated, they're now these numbers. As you can see, they're the locked numbers. Okay, let's have a look at what's in the database before I unlock so you can see what's actually happening there. Now, SQL Management Studio is the interface for accessing the database. If you haven't got it installed, please install it. Whenever you need customer support from us, you're going to need this installed. Won't happen always, but it's nice to have it there just in case. So we're going down into the database that's associated to TSD, and there's a lot of tables in here. There are 4 tables, which we covered in the slide. Okay, we got vendors. Okay, we got plates. We got members. And we have drawing list. Okay, let's have a look at the drawing list. In here, if you right mouse click and you go select top 100 rows, this is a little bit of SQL querying. I'm just going to show you what's going on so that you can see it. The project number that I need to filter out, because this is all data that I've got in my database, the first 1,000 rows that came in. And at the end of it, what it's doing is it's grabbing all the data that's associated to the fields that are in the database in the drawing list table. And I'm just going to type in where, and I want to grab the project or the current project that I'm working on, and I want to grab the first 4 digits, which gives me my project number. I am covering a little bit of SQL because without SQL, none of this can possibly happen. So I'm grabbing the first 4, all right, and I want my project number to be 002. Okay, and if I run this now, these are all the drawings that went through the locking phase. Okay, you can see section 1, section 2 there. You can see column 1, column 2. Now, it doesn't grab the second instance. It grabs the very first instance that it can find, right, and unlocks that, and locks that, and unlocks that, and unlocks that, and works with that. You'll also notice that with the connections, it's actually telling me which connection it belongs to and what plate is being used in there as well. If we scroll across to the right-hand side, right to the end, we've got old drawing file, and the old drawing file is where the actual template file is. So it's keeping a link to that. Now, this is locked, and I can see that it's locked by looking at the file names, and I can also see here I don't have null in the table. Okay, this might be a bit far-fetched for you guys to understand, but I'm just telling you that there is a link that it uses to find the old file. So if you move the old file, you're going to get problems unlocking. Simply run SQL Sync. Okay, when we unlock, this list goes null. And I'll show you how that happens as well. So let's unlock column 1. Okay, so it's gone through an unlock process. Okay, and it's updating the drawings based on what it finds as it goes through the unlocking process, and it's updating the current locked items, and it's letting you know that those drawings have now changed. So this has now gone back to its template location. Any files that are unique to this member that have been locked have now been deleted and removed from the locking folders, and that's any files that are unique. Okay, any components that are unique. Over here, if they are components that were used on column 1 that are in column 2, they will remain. What's also happened, okay, because we had 4 of these base plates in there now that are locked, and if I go to open up the drawing, you'll notice now there are 2, because there are only 2 items that ever went through the lock phase. That's been updated. And you'll also notice now the drawing revision has changed to SS to let you know that the quantities have changed. It's just to let you know that the drawing's changed, and it's flagged it. We go up into the document manager, and now you can see the files that were locked are now back in design, telling you that there was a locked process in place. The files that were locked that have been adjusted, which are these guys here, are now being made superseded in your list to tell you that whatever revision you had in there, it now needs to be bumped because you may have issued the drawing to your customer. So it's now warning you that you need to go in and update those drawings. Means you may need to change the revision. In this case, the revision was quantities modified because we unlocked it and the quantities were modified. Could be just as simple as that. Let's have a look at the database. And I'll just run this again. So execute, so right mouse click, execute. And you'll notice now the locked component that was in there has now gone back to its template file name, right? And also the plates associated to that. And then when I peel over to the right, you'll see null for the files that are in there. That's what happens when you have unlocked files. It's telling me I now have unlocked files and they are not locked. The drawing file that's associated to it, you can see obviously that those drawing files are unlocked because they're not named with an SE or a PL or a VN. This is how database works with TSD. This is how locking and unlocking works with TSD. Now I can't go through all the scenarios of where you may get it wrong or you may get it right or whatever. What I can do is just go through some things with you so that you can see how troubleshooting occurs for me. So we start this slide up. Slideshow from current slide. So troubleshooting. So the link between the SolidWorks model and the SQL database can sometimes have issues. Troubleshooting the issues comes with experience. I don't expect you to get it overnight. However, I can help you understand what the issues are and help you get through them so that you can fix them relatively quick. The issues usually arise when your point A to point B, your template stage, has not been done correctly or followed through from our tips and tricks. Okay, now tips and tricks, I'll show you where that is so we can come back to troubleshooting. Okay, tips and tricks. When you install the trial library, you get this page, which is the task page. You'll find it up in the top here. And then click over to the tutorials. This is the tips and tricks. Okay, major reference material should be on page, but we put it there because then we know that people have actually gone through and done the tutorials. Okay, so here's the do's and the don'ts. This covers you so that when you go to lock, you understand what's actually happening. Please read this, go through it, right? You'll see the don'ts. Okay, the don'ts cover things like not allowing you to mirror components. TSD does not allow you to mirror components. You cannot mirror components because if you mirror it, it's a different component. It's different volume, different centroid, everything's different. Okay, don't hide or suppress pattern seed components because the pattern seed component is going to get swapped out in its process, so you cannot do that. Do not hide connections. Okay, do not exclude them from BOM. Just rules like that. So we make sure that this is up to date. As soon as a customer does something and we have to be called in for remote assistance, because SolidWorks is so wide in its flexibility, we've got to actually just try and capture as much as possible in the do's and don'ts. Eventually, this information here for the don'ts gets filtered into the auditing system so that when you get audited, it'll flag it right there. Okay? So just make sure you read through that, get familiar with that, know that it exists because it's there for you and your processes from point A to point B in the template phase, and that will remove a lot of issues on the track when it comes to unlocking and locking. Okay. Now, new customers, new resellers that have this problem, for a reseller, please send them our way. We're happy to help. We can certainly go through a process to help them. Okay. Until they become knowledgeable about how and what it is that caused it, we offer that support free. Because we know what we're doing, we can get straight in there, fix it straight away, get everything up and running again. Now, it's going to take a couple of times when the issues do pop up, and you must be sitting in front of us so you're watching exactly what we're doing as far as the troubleshooting goes. Now, if you get a crash, contact us straight away, please. Don't hold back, because I know you will anyway, because if you don't, and you go to unlock, you're going to get files being swapped out from different files all over the place, and then you're going to go, oh no, my model's turned to crap. Don't freak out, because there is a process that we've got that will allow you to fix that fairly quickly. Okay, we have a file, which is a SQL query file that we can run in the background. Okay, that SQL query file will remove all the data. I know this is probably scaring you, but it will remove all the data from that project that you select in the SQL query file, and it will remove it all out of there. So it's fresh. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll run SQL Sync over the top of your project, and it will go through your whole project and it will check files and put all the data back in the database so that everything is right and perfect. Now, a crash in the middle of a lock can be disastrous if you don't call us. So please call us, send us a support call. We're always there to help. Okay, now if you have this happen, it means there's a process that you haven't done. And we want to make sure that you've got this process down pat and you understand it completely. Now, it scares people when they see files getting swapped in and out. It does scare people. I understand it because no one's ever seen it before. They think, oh, it's an instability. Well, realistically, it's not instability. It's just a couple of processes that have gone wrong, or instability. Well, I can't say it's not instability. It's probably software that's caused it, of course. And TSD talking to SQL, or SQL not talking to Windows, Windows not talking to SolidWorks. It can be any of those things where you pull your hair out and you go, I don't know what's going on here. Okay, we will come in and we will troubleshoot your issue. Now, if we find that there's instability in your network connection or instability within your software, the first thing we're going to do is say, uninstall your software, reinstall it, because you've got other things going on in there that's playing with it. If we find that. If we find that the crash occurred because something interfered with the process, we'll certainly tell you to switch that off and make sure that it doesn't occur again. However, when it occurs, we can't replicate it. What we can do is just do a little bit of an assessment on your computer to find out what's going on. We use TeamViewer, and TeamViewer allows us to just do a little bit of research right there and then. Okay, now we can also teach you in the process of what to do when this happens, and we can give you the file that we have. Just be careful of the file we give you, because if you're not familiar with it and you haven't used it before, it will destroy the data in the background for your project. But you've always got to run SQL Sync no matter what happens anyway once you run that. And then that should put everything back to normal again. So nothing to be feared of. Now, if locking stops, if you're going through a process of locking and it stops, it's because you've got something wrong in your template from point A to point B where you haven't followed the processes. I've got to be blunt. I have to be blunt about this because that's exactly what happens. It means that you haven't followed the processes, or you've done something that we don't know about because SolidWorks is so flexible. We've got to figure out what's caused it. So in the audit list, that's the first thing that'll pop up. It'll do an audit before it locks it, and it'll tell you that there are some things going on. Files that you're not using, in-context references looking out of the project folder or out of the assembly folder, drawings having mismatched references behind them, because it checks that for you too to make sure that your drawings are matching what the actual part is that's behind it, because you don't want that stuff happening. That can cause a lot of grief, and with SolidWorks that's easy to do. I've seen it happen. TSD checks that to make sure that that's all right for you, which is really cool. Some of the issues we've been getting around vendor components. Okay, vendor components we covered a couple of weeks ago on filing. Actually, I think it was last week. Vendor components have to have manual data put into it. That manual data is required for locking. If you don't put it in, TSD will stop. We have added the feature in our next version of TSD 2015 where in the auditing process it will find your vendor item and it will tell you which data is missing and give you a dialog box to tell you to put it in. You fill it in and then you click OK and then it goes through the locking process, which is great. So it doesn't pause. It does not tell you that there isn't anything happening, which is what it currently does with TSD now. If you're locking something and it stops and you're going, what's going on? It's taking forever. It's because there's something wrong with a component or something wrong that's going on that you haven't done in your processes. I had a customer that in a dummy sketch, instead of labeling it D for a driving sketch using the D file name, he used M. So when it went to lock, it grabbed the M file and it had no solid in it. It was just a driving sketch and it stopped dead in its tracks. Okay? Making sure that your driving sketches are in D and excluded from BOM would have solved that problem, and he wouldn't have gone, oh, lock's not working. So just consider that there are these different things that are in play that should be right at the beginning before you lock. Okay, if your locking doesn't work, you've got to go through an audit and have a look at what's going on in your model. Go through the tips and tricks and check it to make sure that it's working okay. Okay, so every section, vendor and body part should have, plate part should have a body in it, okay? I've had models where it's gone through a lock and it's stopped, and then I've gone to open up the section. And I've gone in there and there's a structural feature, but no body. or the structural feature is suppressed. I don't know how you can have a structural feature without a body. I'd never seen that before. But anyway, it stopped dead in its tracks. I don't know how to pick that up. Somewhere down the track, we'll check to see if the component's actually got a body in it. Okay, so it stopped. So when you get these stops happening with the locking process, then there's something you have to look at in your model that's causing it. Okay, now the audit window will generally stop at the affected part, so it'll tell you that the part has got something wrong with it if there is a stop process happening. So if it stops on a vendor item, it means that you're missing the 3 fields that are associated to it in the config fields area, not the custom properties field, because vendors are different. You want to see our previous webinar and make sure that you understand what that means, and that covers that, so you've got it. Okay, that's what you should do if locking stops. Now, what should I do if unlocking starts swapping out the wrong parts? This is where everyone panics and freaks out. Firstly, don't freak out. Do not freak out, okay? Your parts are still there. It hasn't deleted them all. It hasn't ruined all your work. You may have to do a little bit of fixing up. Okay, so there is a solution. You can actually manually go back and go replace components. Okay, replacing the components will allow you to roll it back to its original state. That's what I do. And when I do that to customers and put the model back, they go, oh, it's still there. You go, you beauty, nothing to worry about, because it is. It's still there. It's when it copies over the components that are there that used to be there that is concerning. We may have to roll that back to the lock phase and go back the other way. I haven't had that happen yet, so it's been pretty good with that. Okay, so then we have to go through a process once we've rolled them back to erase the 4 tables in there and use our file and clean out the database, and then run SQL Sync over the top of it, and that will put everything back to where it was. Now, there was something that caused it to make it happen. It means we need to do an audit through your model, because between points A and B in the template phase when you were modeling, you did something that wasn't or didn't comply to the tips and tricks we gave you. So once you get an understanding of what actually has happened, okay, it won't happen again, as long as you make sure it doesn't happen again, of course, and as long as you can learn from that. A lot of our customers go through this little bit of a phase with locking and unlocking, locking and unlocking, locking and unlocking, and they'll continue to keep doing that. You go, okay, well, there's got to be some reasoning behind what you're doing with the unlocking, locking processes, okay? Question is, do you really want to do that on a live project so that it doesn't cause you any grief? You can, but I don't recommend it. Okay, so swapping out parts, that's what pretty much happens, okay? So don't freak out. We'll run this file. We'll give it to you so that you can use it in case it happens again. But you've always got to remember to use SQL after it. So in conclusion to this whole process of locking and unlocking, my best approach, and I've offered this to others, spend some time modeling in a test project, okay? Test your models by uploading them to the library, and if they don't get uploaded to the library, you're going to get an audit. It's going to tell you there's something wrong, okay? So that's the first filtered process. And this will teach you what you can and can't do at a first instance, okay? And it's going to filter out some of the issues before you even get to locking. Okay, so test it, insert your member from the library after you've added it, and put it into a project, okay? Don't put it into a live project, put it into a test project. Okay, make sure it's going to lock. So we'll go through a lock process. And if it locks and there's no problems, you're beauty, your library model works. If it doesn't lock and there's something in it, you've done it on a project, a dummy test project over to the side, which is great. You haven't interfered with your project that you're working on, and there's something going on with it, and you haven't messed up the database associated to the project you need to work on. So do it off to the side, test it, lock it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you can run that file we've got, delete the database for the project, delete the data out of the database for that particular test project you got, and delete the model out of there, or play with the model and upload it back into the library and put it back in again. You can test it and make sure that it works okay. Once you get the processes in your head right from point A to point B as far as the templates go, locking and unlocking is really easy. It really is easy. I don't have any problems myself, and I know some customers that don't have any problems now at all because they understand what point A to point B is. So test your project stuff or your library stuff that you're going to put in the library on a test project. Test it to make sure it works. when you're working with a group of people and you put something in the library and they go and insert it into their project and you haven't tested to see if it's going to lock or unlock, you're not really doing your job properly. So you might want to set up a test area in your library off to the side where people can't get access to it, or where they don't know you've put things, or you just let them know that that's a template area, and insert that into your project and test it and make sure that it's going to lock and unlock no problem. Because once you iron out the issues, it means that everyone else in your office, if you're working in a collaborative environment, won't have any issues either. I learned from experience because we've been through this with Quadro Design and our team, because we beta test the software on live projects. And I'm just letting you know that once you iron out the bugs at the beginning, I tell you, projects go together smoothly. They really do. And they go really quick. But if you don't iron out these bugs and people start inserting them into your project, and you haven't followed the tips and tricks, and you don't understand what it is that you haven't done, and you go to do a lock and you get halfway through it and everyone's waiting for you, because when you do a lock, it usually happens on a Friday afternoon because you've promised your customer that you're going to have your project done by then. And it's flat chat at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the drawing should have been out an hour ago, and locking stops. That's when we get phone calls Fridays. I'm usually about 6 beers in. No, just kidding. I'm just waiting for phone calls on Fridays, because that's when locking occurs and everyone is going through that process. And it's not be-all, end-all of dismal processes. Believe me, it isn't. Once I get in there and I have a look, I can fix it relatively quickly and we're up and running again. Okay? Some people have had some issues with this. They really have. Some people haven't. They understand it completely because they can follow processes at the beginning from A to B, no issues. And now that you are aware of it and you know what you have to do to get there, and if you do have a problem, please don't be disgruntled, don't be upset. It's just a process that you haven't followed that's caused it, or some other software issue that's going on that you don't know about that's caused it. And that's why we're here, to support you through that process. So that's pretty much it. What I'm going to do is open up the room so that people can ask some questions about what it is that's just happened. We can answer any questions. Hopefully there's not too much feedback. There's a few people on.